In the Civil Affairs Bureau. After waiting bitterly for 3 hours, I wearily sent a message, Adrian, let's break up. Just as I stepped out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, I ran into my boss, Ethan. President, are you getting married today too? Secretary Joey, would you like to marry me? Thinking of the message Adrian had just sent, Joey, don't make a fuss. Chloe is really sick, be good, we'll get the certificate in a couple of days. I smiled at Ethan and replied, sure. Today was the day my fiancé Adrian and I were supposed to get our marriage certificate. After waiting for him at the Civil Affairs Bureau for 3 hours, I finally got through to his phone. But it was his white moonlight, Chloe, who answered. Where is Adrian? Adrian is cooking for me, Miss Joey, is there something? Cooking? I let out a sarcastic sneer. I'd been with Adrian for 2 years and didn't even know he could cook. At that moment, Adrian's voice came from the other end, Joey, Chloe almost fainted today, her family isn't around, I'm taking care of her. I smirked, she doesn't faint any other day, but faints exactly on the day I'm getting the certificate. What perfect timing. I suddenly gripped the phone tightly, Adrian, I'll ask you one thing, are you still coming to get the certificate with me today? Joey, I can't leave now, getting it a couple of days later won't make a difference. Adrian's tone was somewhat impatient. Just as I was about to speak, I vaguely heard Chloe's exclamation from the other end, ouch, so hot. Immediately after, the call was hung up. Without seeing it myself, I could imagine Adrian's eyes full of heartache as he coaxed his white moonlight. Ever since Chloe returned, as long as her eyes slightly reddened in front of Adrian, he would look heartbroken. But I've never received such treatment. In Adrian's eyes, I should be sensible and understanding. He never realized that I am also a woman who sometimes needs his care. Subconsciously, my heart tightened, but it didn't hurt as much as I imagined. Listening to the busy tone on the phone, I took a deep breath, a mocking curve formed at the corner of my lips, and I wearily sent a message, Adrian, let's break up. Enough, since Adrian wants to coax his white moonlight, I'll fulfill their wish. Just as I stepped out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, I saw Ethan standing at the door, my boss, the president of Ye Group. I was slightly stunned. As Ethan's secretary, I didn't know this was on his schedule today. President, are you getting married today too? Ethan's dark eyes glanced at me, and he faintly hummed in response. Then, congratulations. I wanted to ask why he came alone to get married, but thinking as a secretary, I shouldn't pry into the boss's private affairs, so I swallowed the words. Ethan smiled faintly, Secretary Joey, would you like to marry me? Me, huh? Such a coincidence, could Ethan have been stood up too? Ethan's voice was low and calm, anyway, right now both you and I are alone, why not get married together? Thinking of the message Adrian had just sent, Joey, don't make a fuss. Chloe is really sick, be good, we'll get the certificate in a couple of days. I smiled at Ethan and replied, sure. In less than 10 minutes, I had a freshly issued marriage certificate in my hand. Looking at the photo on the certificate, I suddenly wondered if I had been a bit impulsive. What? Regret it? Ethan asked faintly. I pursed my lips and countered, President, are you quarreling with Miss Lynn? As a secretary, I knew some of the boss's private matters, I even helped pick gifts for Miss Lynn. Although I've never met this Miss Lynn, a woman who could make Ethan put in effort must have a special relationship. Ethan looked at me, his voice very faint, she doesn't have that qualification. Secretary Joey, you'll know later. Oh. I basically obey my boss's words, after all, he's the one who pays me. But I felt that Ethan's eyes just now seemed to carry a trace of sorrow, which doesn't fit his domineering president persona. After parting with Ethan, I returned to my small apartment. When I was with Adrian, we didn't fully cohabitate, so I bought this small apartment for myself. Back home, the first thing I did was delete and block all of Adrian's contact methods. From now on, he walks his single-plank bridge, and I walk my broad road. Wait, no, I suddenly remembered that my broad road now includes Ethan. He said he'd give me a week to adapt, and then I'd move in with him. Thinking that I'd be facing him almost 24 hours a day, boss during the day, and at night. I suddenly felt a bit at a loss. I don't know why Ethan proposed getting married together. Could he have been angered by Miss Lynn too? I've only been his secretary for a month, not very familiar. And yet I actually agreed? Thinking of Ethan's face, could I have been attracted by his looks? As I was lost in thought, the phone suddenly rang, an unknown number. Hello? Joey, you blocked me? Adrian's gnashing voice came from the other end. I could imagine his gloomy face at the moment. He's always been like that. After being together for so long, whenever I threw a little tantrum, he thought I was being dramatic and immediately showed a bad face. I don't know how Chloe acts dramatic in front of him every day, and he's blind to it. The me before yesterday would still accommodate him, coax him, but now. Yes, we've broken up, if not block, what to keep it for? My sarcastic tone seemed to anger Adrian more. Can you stop being unreasonable? If you want to get the certificate, we can go tomorrow. I was amused to anger. Adrian, you're not the only man in the world, you have no chance now. After saying that, I immediately hung up, blocked him, all in one go. The next day, I went downstairs to work. Just as I stepped out of the community gate, a car stopped beside me. A familiar car, Adrian's. He got out, walked up to me, and started questioning, Joey, have you finished your drama? Can you be more sensible? Blocking is very childish. I speechlessly rolled my eyes. Mr. Adrian, have you lost your memory? We've already broken up. Adrian looked at me deeply, as if just realizing I wasn't joking. Yesterday Chloe was really sick, I was just taking care of her. If you're angry because of this, I'll apologize. Even the apology was so perfunctory, I don't know how I endured it for the past 2 years. I sighed softly, feeling sorry for my past self. I looked up at him. Adrian, what your relationship with Chloe is, we both know clearly. As your ex-girlfriend, kindly advise you, keep your eyes open when judging people. Move aside. Joey, what do you mean? Where did Chloe offend you? She's just my good friend. As expected, she's the one on the tip of his heart. He doesn't allow me to say a bad word about Chloe. I indifferently shrugged, pushed Adrian aside, and raised my hand to hail a taxi. At that moment, a black Bentley stopped beside me. The driver got out, quickly walked to me, and said respectfully, Madam, sir has something today. He asked me to pick you up for work. I was stunned for several seconds before reacting. The sir the driver mentioned should be Ethan. This might be the after effect of a flash marriage. I almost forgot I married him yesterday. Before I could speak, Adrian looked at the driver in shock and asked first, what did you just call her? The driver glanced at him. This is my sir's wife, of course, called Madam. Adrian was even more incredulous. Joey, when did you get married? Yesterday. I lightly uttered 2 words, ignored Adrian, and got into the car. This news should be a blow to Adrian. After all, he's always been confident with me, thinking I couldn't live without him. Even though time and again during dates, he left me for Chloe, I still chose to forgive him in the end. But this time, I won't. Back at the company, I quickly entered work mode, first organized the files from various departments for Ethan's approval, then handed them to his assistant Sean. Sean didn't take the files but smiled and said, Secretary Joey, from now on, deliver the files personally. Huh? But I was a bit troubled. When I was suddenly promoted to President's secretary, Sean had explained many precautions, one of which was not to enter Ethan's office casually. Sean explained, the President instructed that Secretary Joey can enter and exit his office freely from now on. His tone carried a hint of profundity. I guessed he probably knew about me and Ethan getting the certificate. Okay. I held the files and reluctantly knocked and entered. Actually, I hadn't figured out how to face Ethan. Boss turning into husband, it's a bit awkward no matter what. Behind the large desk, Ethan was seriously looking down at files. I quickly put down the files and wanted to slip out quietly. Secretary Joey. From behind came the man's always faint and cold voice. I took a deep breath, put on a professional smile, turned and asked, President, the files are on the desk, any other instructions? Ethan put down his pen, leaned back in the chair, arms crossed, looking at me with a half-smile. I raised my hand to touch my face. I did light makeup this morning, could it be smudged? After a while, Ethan slowly spoke, have you had breakfast? I quickly responded, President, do you want to buy breakfast? I'll go now. Before, Sean had me order breakfast for Ethan a few times. Ethan curved his lips, teasing, Secretary Joey is really a good employee. Probably, otherwise the president wouldn't suddenly promote a newcomer like me to be your secretary? On this point, I wasn't modest, otherwise, I couldn't think of other reasons. I originally applied for the company's design department, but was notified to be admitted as president's secretary. If not for the doubled salary, I wouldn't want to do this secretary job. Upon hearing this, Ethan's eyes flickered, he raised his hand pointing to the coffee table, there's breakfast there, eat it. I was stunned, looked at him puzzled, not understanding his meaning. Ethan patiently said again, your stomach illness is from not eating on time usually, especially skipping breakfast. That breakfast is for you, eat some. Boss bringing me breakfast? I always felt a bad premonition, and how did he know I have stomach illness? Thinking so, I asked it out. President, how do you know I have stomach illness? And how do you know I don't eat breakfast? Ethan said lightly, you're my secretary, shouldn't I understand you a bit? After a pause, he looked at me and said, Secretary Joey, have you forgotten that now you're not only my employee, but also the person on my marriage certificate? I don't want to lose my wife right after marriage. These words sounded ruthless, but made my heart slightly tighten, and my eyes suddenly filled with a bit of warmth. I'd been with Adrian for 2 years, he never noticed my bad stomach, let alone remind me to eat on time. I remember once my stomach hurt, it was really uncomfortable. I called him, asked him to buy medicine for me. He replied with one sentence, buy it yourself, I have urgent matters now. Without waiting for me to speak, he hung up mercilessly. Later, I accidentally learned from his friend that Adrian's urgent matter that day was to pick up Chloe who just got off the plane at the airport. I know, in Adrian's place, I always rank behind Chloe. Perhaps back then, he was with me only because Chloe hadn't returned yet. I was just a substitute. Secretary Joey? The man's pleasant cold fragrance entered my nose. I suddenly came back to senses, seeing Ethan's handsome face enlarged in front of me. My heart inexplicably started pounding. Press. President, what's the matter? Scared by Ethan like this, my suppressed emotions just now disappeared completely. Ethan raised his hand and lightly tapped my forehead. What are you spacing out for? Hurry and eat the breakfast. This small action made my face slightly blush. I subconsciously looked at the door, worried if someone came in and saw it would be bad. Although I married Ethan, I still didn't want the company people to know, otherwise who knows how many would gossip behind my back. Ethan saw my cautious appearance, couldn't help frowning. Don't worry, my office isn't for just anyone to enter casually. Oh. I quickly walked to the coffee table, picked up the breakfast, then I'll take it back to my workstation to eat. Secretary Joey taking breakfast out from my office, not afraid of being misunderstood? My steps paused, seems like yes. I silently sat down on the nearby sofa, smiled awkwardly, then I'll eat and then go out. Ethan then satisfactorily walked back to the desk to continue reading files. Now, the office was overly quiet, making me not dare to chew too loudly when eating, afraid of breaking the peace here. I have to say, the breakfast Ethan prepared suits my taste very well, he seems like a very thoughtful person. Subconsciously, I raised my eyes to look at the man behind the desk, noble and clear, with a handsome and compelling appearance. Usually at the company, I often see some female colleagues infatuated with Ethan. Before, I wholeheartedly treated him as boss, didn't feel it. Now seriously looking at this man, he is really attractive. Hard to imagine, I actually married him. Perhaps noticing my gaze, Ethan looked up. I panicked and withdrew my gaze, ate the last bite of breakfast, stood up and said, President, I'm done eating, I'll go out to work first. I walked to the door. From behind came the man's gentle voice, Madam, dinner together tonight. I neither agreed nor refused, just hurried out. Mainly this call of madam, I couldn't bear it. Before with Adrian, it was always me chasing him. Now suddenly being treated like this, and by my own boss, it feels a bit unadapted no matter what. Soon it was off work time. I finished my work at hand already at 7. I glanced at the president's office still lit, don't know when he can get off, the dinner mentioned in the morning, he wouldn't have forgotten, right? Forgotten is fine too, otherwise facing Ethan's face for a long time, my little heart can't take it. Just thinking, the phone popped a message. Ethan, wait for me at the parking lot. I sighed softly, resignedly went to the parking lot. Secretary Joey, are you waiting for someone? I stood at the elevator hall door of the parking lot, met the marketing department manager Leo coming out. I nodded, yes. Leo's eyes stared straight at me. Joey, when do you have time? Let's have dinner together. I frowned. When I just joined the company, Leo would occasionally ask me for dinner. I refused multiple times, but he persisted. His intentions towards me, I understood clearly. Just as I was about to refuse, the phone rang. Seeing the caller ID was Ethan, I quickly answered, hello? Exit B. Okay, I'll go now. Hung up, I greeted Leo, and hurried to exit B. Seeing the Bentley from the morning, I habitually opened the back door to sit in, then heard Ethan in the driver's seat say faintly, Secretary Joey really treats me as a driver? Habit. I smirked, sat in the passenger seat. Ethan glanced at me, Secretary Joey is quite popular. Why so sarcastic? I reacted for a moment, then understood this man just saw me talking to Leo. Could it be? Ethan, you're not jealous, are you? Realizing this, my courage suddenly grew, calling him by name. Ethan hummed lightly, didn't answer, started the car and drove out. But I clearly saw him slightly stiffen just now, the kind of embarrassment from being poked in the mind. This man towards me. The restaurant we went to for dinner was a 5-star Western restaurant. Indeed, following a big shot, life is good. While waiting for the dishes, I went to the restroom. I walked out of the restroom, saw Ethan on the restaurant corridor making a call, just hung up now. I lifted my foot to walk towards him, suddenly saw a familiar figure bumping towards Ethan. It looked like an accidental bump. But isn't that woman Chloe? Sorry. Chloe apologized to Ethan with a face full of embarrassment, her voice coquettish, giving people goosebumps. Ethan stepped back a big step, glanced at her. Chloe looked even more shy. Hello, sir, can I add your contact? Ethan faintly uttered 2 words, no. Then strode away. Chloe stamped her foot unwillingly. I watched this scene, coldly curved my lips in a smile. Chloe obviously deliberately wanted to flirt with Ethan just now. If Adrian knew, I wonder what he'd think. After all, Chloe is the purest white moonlight in his heart. Back at the table, the dishes were already served. I was a bit surprised, all the dishes Ethan ordered were my favorites. He really seems to understand me well. The meal was only halfway through when a familiar voice interrupted. Miss Joey, why are you here? I didn't need to look up to know it was Chloe. Immediately after, I heard Adrian's furious voice, Joey, you broke up with me because you have another man? Originally I wanted to ignore them, but now hearing their questioning, I didn't find it funny but countered, where I am, what I do, what's it to you? Chloe looked aggrieved, but this is a 5-star couple's Western restaurant, you and another man. I wouldn't indulge her. What, is this restaurant owned by your family? Do you think I can't afford it or that I can't come here to eat with another man? But Adrian, hearing me say that about his white moonlight, his face darkened further. Joey, clearly you're wrong, why be so aggressive? Who is this man? Why are you with him? My identity, you're not qualified to know yet. An indifferent voice sounded. Ethan, who had been facing away, slowly turned, his cold gaze sweeping over them. Seeing Ethan, Chloe was first stunned, the trace of triumph at her mouth gradually turned to jealousy. How is the man she fancied earlier here? Adrian was obviously intimidated by Ethan's cold aura around him. I walked to Ethan's arm, linked his arm, smiled lightly. Let me introduce, this is my husband, Ethan. What? Isn't Ethan your boss? Adrian was shocked. He thought this man looked familiar, the president of Ye Group. He had seen him from afar at a banquet once. I then remembered, when I was admitted as Ethan's secretary, I mentioned it to Adrian. At that time, he just perfunctorily said, people of that status probably just value your ability. In his view, what capital do I have to make Ethan like me? But he forgot, once I was also one of the top 3 good-looking people in school. Ethan lowered his eyes looking at me, faintly said, I am Joey's boss, but now also her husband. Since Mr. Adrian knows my identity, he shouldn't disturb my wife anymore. He didn't even glance at Adrian. Although Adrian is also a rich second generation, compared to Ethan, there's no comparison. He held back his anger, could only glare at me. Chloe clenched her hands tightly. Wasn't Miss Joey supposed to get the certificate with Adrian yesterday? How did she marry Mr. Ethan? She's still unwilling to believe why I have such good luck. I said coldly, then I have to thank you. If not for you clinging to Adrian yesterday, I might have missed Ethan. I paused, raised my eyebrow. However, Chloe, you seem quite interested in my men. I took out my phone, clicked a few times, handed it to Adrian. Adrian, look at what your pure and kind girl in your heart is like. I originally didn't want to go this far, but unfortunately Chloe insisted on provoking me. This video is her trying to flirt with Ethan, captured by me. Chloe also leaned over to look. Immediately her eyes widened. Adrian, Adrian isn't stupid, of course understood what Chloe's intentions towards Ethan were at that time. But he, whether to save his own face or choose to believe Chloe, looked at me with an ugly face. Joey, I know what kind of person Chloe is. You think this video can prove what? Look at yourself, as my fiancé, turned around and married someone else. Have you long hooked up with your boss, but hypocritically said to break up with me? Listen, these words Adrian said, every sentence is my fault. In his view, I gave him a green hat. Really ridiculously extreme. I really had water in my brain to like him back then. Chloe heard Adrian's words, relieved, a trace of pride flashed in her eyes. She knew Adrian would always stand on her side. I mocked, Adrian, whatever you think doesn't matter now. I've fulfilled you and Chloe, and I'm married too. From now on, let's each live well. If we meet again, pretend not to know. Adrian was just about to speak, but was coldly interrupted by Ethan. Mr. Adrian, before getting the certificate yesterday, Joey and I were in a superior subordinate relationship. Although we don't need to explain to you, I don't want to hear anyone slandering my wife. After saying that, he picked up my bag beside me, held my hand. Let's go. I let him lead me out of the restaurant. For a long time, no one has protected me like this. At this moment, my exhausted heart seemed to get a trace of peace, and a trace of palpitation. A week passed in the blink of an eye. I also gradually adapted to my relationship with Ethan. Although at work, Ethan didn't give me extra care because of our relationship. But in life, I have to say, he is a very good husband, very attentive, very caring. I suddenly felt quite lucky, that day at the Civil Affairs Bureau being stood up, but married Ethan. But I never figured out, was Ethan really stood up that day too, and married me in a fit of anger? I asked him once, he just smiled, said the time hasn't come. Later I didn't ask again. According to the previous agreement, I also moved into Ethan's villa. However, just as I moved in, Ethan had already gone on a business trip, which avoided the initial cohabitation awkwardness. Though he's not here, every day he still reminds me on time to eat. My stomach illness hasn't recurred during this time. Today after work, I went back to the small apartment, packed a few things to bring to the villa. Just out of the apartment, a gust of autumn wind blew, a bit chilly. I walked to the intersection to hail a taxi. Suddenly a shadow appeared behind me, getting closer. I was about to quicken my pace, but was grabbed by a big hand. I screamed in fright, "Ah! Joey, it's me." Adrian's voice. I looked up in lingering fear. It really was Adrian. "Adrian, what are you doing here? I've been waiting for you for days." Finally waited. Adrian looked at me, strong alcohol smell surged with his breath. I frowned tightly, forcefully shook off his hand. We've broken up, why wait for me? Joey, turns out you were right, Chloe deceived me. She just wants to find a richer man. It seems Adrian didn't have no doubts about Chloe after seeing the video that day, maybe even investigated her. I raised my eyebrow. Congratulations, finally saw through her. But what does this have to do with me? Adrian's expression dimmed. Sorry, Joey, can we not break up? These words made me laugh speechlessly. Is this discovering my goodness only after the white moonlight betrayed him? Adrian, I'm married. Even if not, we have no possibility. Ask yourself, these 2 years, did you really like me or just treat me as Chloe's substitute? I suddenly remembered once, Adrian got drunk, kept calling Chloe in his mouth. In his heart, there's always only Chloe. The past me was just too stupid, moved by his calls of Joey. Adrian was silent for a moment, then grabbed my hand again. Joey, I've thought it over. The one I like is you. It's me who didn't realize before that I've unknowingly fallen for you. So what? To Adrian's sudden confession, my heart was calm as still water. You say you like me, do I have to like you? Please don't look for me anymore, I don't want my husband to misunderstand. Hearing my words, Adrian's eyes reddened scarily, the grip on my hand tightened. I tried hard to shake off, but couldn't, feeling a bit scared inside. Adrian, let go. Suddenly, Adrian was punched staggering, almost fell to the ground. It was Ethan. Seeing him, my heart suddenly settled. Ethan squinted at Adrian. Adrian, I've warned you not to disturb my wife again. Adrian raised his hand to wipe a trace of blood from his mouth corner. Under alcohol's effect, facing Ethan, he seemed much tougher. Joey is my fiancé, it's you who interfered with us. I looked at him amused, without leaving any face. Adrian, pretending deep affection now, don't you find it ridiculous? I'm married to Ethan now, I'm only his wife, and you, go do what you should, don't appear in front of us again. After saying, I pulled Ethan to leave, leaving Adrian stunned in place. Got in the car, I pondered for a moment, said, I came to get some things, don't know how Adrian is here. Regardless if Ethan would overthink, I still explained, to avoid unnecessary misunderstandings. Ethan hummed low, I know, as long as you're fine. This simple sentence made my heart slightly warm. He came to find me first thing after business trip, this is the feeling of being valued. Ethan. Can I hug you? Words fell, regardless if he agreed. I leaned over and hugged him tightly. At this moment, I only treated him as my husband, not boss. Clearly felt the man's body slightly stiffen, then raised hand to hug me back, said low, Joey, from now on, there's me. The tone carried affirmation, seemed also a trace of wish fulfilled. No man has ever said such words to me. I heard my heartbeat like drumming. If not for being sober enough, I'd think Ethan seems to have liked me for a long time. Weekend. I nestled at home, planning to paint. Actually, I studied design in university, just haven't picked up the brush for a long time. I called Ethan, asked if I can use his study. Ethan, I want to paint, can I use your study? Ethan seemed to hesitate on the other end, then said, the room next to my study, you can paint there. Okay. By the way, when are you back? Soon. Do you want dessert? I'll bring for you. I was stunned, then smiled, if not troublesome, bring it. I do like sweets usually, just didn't expect Ethan noticed. Hung up, I took the painting tools to the room Ethan mentioned. I've moved in for about half a month, never entered this room. The instant I opened the door, I was still shocked. This is actually a painting studio, with many painting tools inside. Just none unpacked. Could Ethan like painting too? As secretary, I'm familiar with Ethan's basic info, but his hobbies don't include painting. But this studio is really comfortable, I soon immersed in painting. Don't know how long passed, until the door was pushed open, Ethan carrying a dessert box, also holding a bunch of yellow roses came in. Finished painting? I put down the brush, stood up facing him, yes, haven't painted for a long time, a bit rusty. Ethan carefully looked at my painting, smiled faintly, not bad, skills haven't regressed. I was attracted by the things in his hand, momentarily didn't notice his words. This flower for me? Of course for madam, girls should all like flowers. Ethan handed me the flowers, put the dessert on the side table, opened it. You can eat a bit of dessert, we can eat dinner soon. I held the bunch of flowers, the rich fragrance suddenly spread, lips unconsciously curved, thanks. This should be the feeling of being pampered. The dessert was a very exquisite strawberry cake, my favorite flavor. Ethan, I find this boss particularly understands employees. Ethan looked at me, curved his lips, only understand you. My cheek suddenly burned, quickly changed topic. How is there this studio at home? Do you paint too? Ethan slightly raised his eyebrow. I don't paint. Then this. Prepared for you. Ethan faintly interrupted me. I pursed my lips. If at this point I still haven't noticed something unusual, that would be really stupid. I looked up at him. How do you know I can paint? I'm sure I didn't write it on my resume. Ethan unhurriedly said, Madam originally applied for design department, though studying design more or less can paint. This studio looks like set for oil painting. How do you know I like oil painting? I stared straight at him, wanting to see through his subtle expressions, but this man was very calm, no trace of guilt in his expression. He just smiled faintly. Wait a bit more, I'll tell you. After a pause, he said, Secretary Joey, next week a university's anniversary, help arrange it in my schedule. After saying, he walked out of the studio. I reacted a bit slowly. Ethan is also from a university? But someone like him must be a prominent figure in school, how come I've never heard? A few days later. A university's anniversary day. Originally I didn't plan to go back, but Ethan was invited back to a university. As secretary I accompanied him. After looking at related materials, I knew your group donates a lot to a university every year, no wonder a university lists Ethan as special guest. Since graduation, I haven't been back to school for a long time. While Ethan and the principal were talking, I strolled alone in the campus. Enemies meet on a narrow road, unexpectedly met Chloe again. But she is indeed a student of a university, appearing here isn't strange. I withdrew my gaze, wanted to pretend not seeing her, detour. But she saw me, immediately came up, completely without the delicacy in front of Adrian, arrogantly shouted at me, Joey, did you say something to Adrian, that's why he ignores me recently? I frowned. That day Adrian wanted to reconcile with me, seems not drunk talk, really abandoned Chloe. I sarcastically curved my lips, what you've done behind Adrian's back, you know in your heart. Adrian isn't a fool. Chloe gnashed her teeth in anger, it's all you, if not for you showing that video to Adrian, how would he doubt me? Joey, you're deliberately retaliating. Chloe, Adrian is just a man I don't want, why waste time retaliating against you? Don't think yourself so important. Chloe's arrogant face twisted in anger, thinking of something, sneered, you're just hooked up with a rich man, you think a man like Ethan is sincere to you? He's just playing with you. How do you know I'm not sincere to my wife? A cold deep voice sounded. Ethan came over, reached out to hold my waist, gaze coldly looking at Chloe, word by word, in this life, the one I've always liked is only my wife. These words stunned both me and Chloe. Chloe's expression stiffened, heart shattered, eyes full of jealousy and hate. Even if she wants to use means to seduce Ethan, it's not very possible now. And I, in Ethan's words, seemed to finally understand some things I've always ignored. Ethan, have you known me for a long time? Ethan chuckled, didn't answer directly, but said, take you to a place. In Chloe's unwilling gaze, Ethan and I left hand in hand. The place Ethan brought me to was a university's painting room. This place I'm very familiar with. In 4 years of university, whenever I had free time, I'd come here to paint. I slightly raised my head to look at Ethan. How do you know here? Are you really a student of a university? Ethan nodded, but I only stayed at a university for half a year, then went abroad. I suddenly realized, no wonder I've never heard of you, otherwise someone like you must be popular throughout the school. Ethan chuckled low, what kind of person am I? I searched my mind for words to express, handsome, noble, like a god in heaven. So my image in Madam's heart is so good. Ethan lowered his eyes, gaze burning on me, softly said, 6 years ago, I met a girl even more shining here. My mind flashed, stunned. I said, that person couldn't be me, right? But I'm sure I've never seen him. Ethan didn't answer, seemed immersed in his memories, faintly saying, that day I passed by the painting room by chance, looked in through the window, a girl in white dress, high ponytail, focused on painting, sunlight through the window sprinkled on her, as if casting a halo, very beautiful. That's when I knew such a girl exists in school. The second time I saw her was at the freshman's welcome party. She played a piano piece, very nice. That's when I knew her name is Joey. Actually at that time I was indeed a prominent figure in school. After the party many freshmen vied to know me, only she seemed not to see me. Later, I often detoured past the painting room, met her many times, each time she was focused in her own world, as if everything outside was irrelevant. Hearing here, my eyes were slightly red, voice slightly choked. Then? You went abroad? Ethan came back to senses, deeply looked at me. Yes, my original plan was already set to go abroad. But meeting you was outside the plan. I didn't expect myself, even after leaving, your figure lingered in my mind, for a whole 5 years. These words like a big hand fiercely gripping my heart, tears uncontrollably welled in my eyes, blurring my vision. Actually I know I look good, from childhood many praised, received many love letters. But to make someone persist in longing for 5 years, this kind of like I've never thought, nor dared to think. I looked up at Ethan, why never look for me? Ethan raised hand gently wiped the tears at my eye corner, voice with some dryness, when I came back, you already had Adrian by your side, I had to continue hiding that feeling. But, I didn't expect you to apply for ye group's position. This might be heaven giving me a chance. I sniffed, so you deliberately made me your secretary. I thought it was my ability that got me promoted. Promoting you to secretary was my selfish desire, but you do meet the requirements. Ethan amusingly scraped my nose, you think if not passed by HR, your resume wouldn't reach me. Then. I pursed my lips, that day at Civil Affairs Bureau, who were you going to marry? Since longing for me, how could he agree to marry another woman? Ethan laughed, Madam, you still don't understand? How could I marry another woman before you? Since realizing falling in love, it's already out of control. I was stunned for a long time, then belatedly understood, heartbeat faster and faster, trembling voice asked, you went to find me that day? Ethan's eyes burning hot, I think Adrian doesn't deserve you, I originally wanted to stop your marriage, didn't expect Adrian stood you up, so. Everything seems coincidental, but just as long-planned scheme. The seemingly cold man, deep hidden love for the girl back then doesn't dissipate over years, like aged wine, the longer hidden the stronger. I tiptoed, hooked his neck, lips fell a kiss on the man's thin lips. Ethan, thank you for not giving up on me. Before, I thought Adrian liked me, at least before Chloe returned, he was caring towards me. Now with comparison, I know Adrian's goodness to me was just because I resemble Chloe by 3 parts. Before, I hung dead on Adrian's tree, but couldn't see the gaze behind falling on me. Now thinking, really stupid beyond saving. Fortunately, Ethan didn't give up. Ethan wiped my tears, lowered eyes kissing my brows and eyes, extremely gentle, Joey, I finally married my girl. He held my hand, slender fingers through my fingertips, led me out of the painting room with calm steps, autumn sun sprinkled on us, lengthening our shadows. Evening back home. Ethan went to the study, I finished bath came out, picked up phone replied a few messages, casually opened Facebook to see. But suddenly saw, Ethan rarely posted on Facebook. The picture is my back view at a university today, caption, wish fulfilled. Curiously I clicked his avatar, surprised to find he didn't not post on Facebook, but previously blocked me. I opened his first Facebook, picture is my back in painting room, caption, she seems to like painting a lot. Second Facebook is my back watching others play basketball on the court, caption, is there someone she likes on the court? My hand holding the phone couldn't help trembling, quickly opened every Facebook. Middle blank for 5 years. Then 2 years ago, picture still my back, caption, 5 years, I finally saw her again. But, she has another man by her side, she seems to like that man a lot. I quickly flipped through a few, then saw the Facebook on the day of getting marriage certificate. I finally married my girl. From then on, his Facebook posts are all my daily life, and I surprisingly didn't notice at all. My eyes began to blur, tears uncontrollably fell, heart sour and astringent, hard to breathe. Turns out these years, he always stood behind quietly watching me, standing where I couldn't see watching me. When seeing others by my side, even dared not disturb. But he's Ethan, he's ye group president, he should be shining, stars surrounding. For me, he was so timid. I stood up, rushed to the study. When pushing open the door, Ethan raised eyes to look at me, seeing my red eyes, immediately stood up strode towards me. I quickly rushed into his arms, tightly hugged him. Ethan hugged me back, hoarse voice asked, "Why crying?" My voice still with sobs, "Ethan, why so stupid, didn't tell me, if I really married Adrian that day, what would you do?" Ethan knew I saw his Facebook, lightly patted my back, said low, "As long as you're happy, everything doesn't matter." I raised my cry-red eyes, looked at him, raised lips, "Ethan, from now on I only like you." The last time seeing Adrian was at a banquet I accompanied Ethan to. He called me, I had to stop my steps wanting to leave. The female companion by his side wasn't Chloe. I heard Chloe seems to have become some rich second-generation's girlfriend. He looked at me, eyes full of complexity. "Joey, how have you been recently?" I faintly glanced at him, "Without you and Chloe by my side, I'm doing very well." Adrian frowned, looking at me now like a shining pearl, still unwilling asked, "Is Ethan good to you?" I chuckled, "Adrian, on this point really need to thank your grace of not marrying, that's why I married Ethan, I'm very happy so please don't disturb me anymore." Leaving this sentence, I walked towards Ethan over there, linked his hand, softly said, "Let's go home." Ethan turned to glance at Adrian behind still staring at me, warmly said, "Okay."